Pictures from a Postcard, Rollof's Travel. In 1948, Carl and Irene Roloff opened a small store at 16 Victoria Avenue and turned a lifelong passion for photography into a full-time career selling cameras. In just 1 year, they expanded into selling records and film. In 1950, they moved south on Front Street to the former location of Al's Diner, around 219-221 Front Street. 10 years later, in 1961, they proceeded north again, just a few doors up the street to 227 Front Street, where the building stands today. The store was initially divided in half, with a nut house in front and a bowling alley in the back. In 1962, a fire broke out, resulting in the need to demolish the third floor and extensively renovate the second floor. Photographs were only processed in black and white when Carl and Irene opened the business. The popular Brownie box camera could be purchased for $5.99. Still, they were soon replaced in the late 1950s by the Polaroid camera. In the late 1960s, a very successful travel agency and a 400-box Canada Post outlet were added. In 1986, they invested in a 1-hour photo lab for developing photos right on the premises. A selection of musical instruments and a sound booth for listening to records enabled Carl and Irene to combine their passion for travel, photography, and music into a lifelong business and fun adventure. Carl enjoyed participating in publicity stunts and entertained shoppers as he strolled along Front Street. He once hired a man to sit atop a pole outside his store, just to see how long he could sit there. The crowd loved it, and store employees poured the pole sitter drinks and sent them up to him by rope. Carl also built a model Eiffel Tower out of toothpicks, displayed it in the window, and held a contest to guess how many toothpicks it had taken to make. The grand prize was a record player and a selection of records. He had a soft spot for cats, and a customer could often find a cat curled up on the counter. It would stroll into the store, and he would make sure it had food and water before it wandered back outside. Carl was a very social guy and would stand outside the door of his store, hands in his pockets, and greet people as they walked by, and that's where this writer first met him. The year was 1955, and this impressionable 12-year-old, almost a teenager, was hopelessly in love with Elvis Presley. Carl was standing inside his store. An Elvis song came on the radio. He was smiling at my best friend Jackie and me, swooning and crooning over our teenage fantasy. When the song was over, Carl took 2 records off the shelf, put them in a bag, and handed them to us. He said, "You two enjoyed that song a lot more than I ever will, so here you go." Needless to say, he had 2 very loyal customers, fans, and new best friends for life. The music side of the business was phased out by 1994 due to a decline in record sales. Irene Roloff Drew learned photography at the age of 2 from her father, an avid photographer. She met the affable Carl when she worked at a Belleville chain store record counter, and they later married. Irene was a savvy businesswoman and a strong voice for our community. The local press referred to her as Main Street's top businesswoman. A favorite expression, and maybe a key to her success, was, "It's a love of doing what you love to do, then doing more." Carl was an avid shutterbug, music buff, stamp collector, and traveler, and an excellent life partner for Irene. Sadly, he passed away in 1970. With the help of her family, Irene continued to run the store until she retired in 1994, selling her business to Andy and Gita Vedhera. Andy and Gita, current owners of Rollof's Travel, immigrated from India to Canada in 1980, and in 2004 began looking to buy a downtown business. Andy had operated a textile business for 10 years. He sold socks to Toronto businesses. He and Gita decided to move back to India. They lasted for 1 month before the heat became too much for them, and they returned to Toronto. They searched for a business on the internet and came across an ad for Rollof's. As soon as he stepped inside the store, Andy decided to buy it, the business inventory and building. When Irene turned over the keys to Andy, she said he was the hardest working man she'd ever met. Gita was very familiar with the travel industry and retail. Irene felt she was leaving her 56-year-old business in good hands. Andy and Gita have been operating Rollof's for 17 years, offering luggage, cameras, travel, clothing, gifts, jewelry, handbags, greeting cards, and more, all while being very involved in the community and the downtown Belleville core.